Millionaire finds Black Nanny crying at his son's grave, then sees the child in her arms. In the sacred silence of Greenwood Cemetery, grief follows familiar paths until an unexpected encounter transforms loss into possibility for profound redemption. Robert Ashford's weekly pilgrimage to his son Michael's grave has become the only ritual that connects him to love that death cannot diminish. Yet today he discovers he is not alone in mourning. When he finds Carmen Rodriguez weeping beside the small headstone, holding a child whose features mirror those of the son he has lost, the boundaries between employer and employee, professional and personal, grief and hope begin to dissolve. Sometimes the most life-changing revelations emerge not from grand discoveries, but from the simple recognition that love creates connections we never knew existed, waiting only for courage to transform pain into the foundation for healing that honors both loss and possibility. If powerful stories like this one move you, subscribe now so you never miss these incredible tales of unexpected connections and human resilience. Robert Ashford drove through the wrought iron gates of Greenwood Cemetery with the mechanical precision of someone performing a ritual that had become both necessary and unbearable. 6 months had passed since the accident that claimed his 8-year-old son Michael, yet the grief remained as sharp as broken glass, cutting through every attempt at normal life with reminders of laughter that would never again fill his empty mansion. At 51, the pharmaceutical billionaire had built an empire worth $4 billion, yet all his wealth felt meaningless in the face of loss that no amount of money could reverse or ease. The weekly visits to Michael's grave had become his only authentic connection to the child whose absence haunted every room of their shared home. Every business decision that had once seemed important, every moment of a future that stretched ahead without the joy and purpose that fatherhood had provided. The cemetery's autumn landscape reflected the desolation that had settled over Robert's world since Michael's death, golden leaves falling like memories that accumulated in drifts around headstones marking other families' losses and grief. He had chosen this exclusive cemetery not for its prestige, but for its peaceful beauty, understanding that Michael would have loved the ancient oak trees and the small pond where ducks gathered in seasons when life felt possible rather than merely endurable. His weekly visits followed the same pattern, fresh flowers placed carefully beside the small headstone, whispered conversations with a son who could no longer respond, silent tears that came despite his best efforts to maintain the composure that business success had taught him to value above authentic emotional expression. Today felt different somehow, charged with an electricity that made Robert's grief feel even more acute and present. The November wind carried scents of earth and dying leaves that reminded him of autumn walks with Michael, treasured moments when business concerns had faded into background noise, while his son's endless questions about everything from science to philosophy had provided windows into a mind that would never fully develop its extraordinary potential. Michael had been exceptionally bright, curious about the world in ways that delighted and amazed Robert, whose own childhood had been marked by emotional distance and academic pressure rather than the warm connection he had tried to provide for his son. The irony that death had stolen their relationship, just as it was deepening into genuine friendship, remained a wound that refused to heal. As Robert approached Michael's gravesite through the familiar path between monuments marking other people's losses, he noticed something that stopped him completely in his tracks. Someone else was there, a woman kneeling beside Michael's grave, her shoulders shaking with sobs that carried the kind of raw grief he recognized from his own darkest moments. She was African American, perhaps in her 30s, wearing simple clothes that spoke of working-class dignity rather than wealth, her natural hair covered by a modest scarf that gave her an almost biblical appearance in the fading afternoon light. In her arms, she held a small child who appeared to be around Michael's age, a boy whose features Robert couldn't see clearly from his position, but whose presence beside his son's grave created questions that demanded answers, yet felt too sacred to interrupt with casual inquiry. As Robert moved closer, fighting between the desire to respect this woman's obvious grief and the need to understand why she was mourning at his son's grave with such intensity, he began to recognize something that made his breath catch in his throat. The woman was Carmen Rodriguez, who had served as Michael's nanny for the final 2 years of his life, caring for him with a devotion that had transcended professional obligation to become something approaching maternal love. Carmen had been more than an employee. She had been Michael's primary caregiver during Robert's frequent business travels, the person who had helped with homework, attended school events when Robert's schedule prevented his participation, and provided the consistent daily care that had allowed Michael to thrive despite his father's demanding career and frequent absences from home. The sight of Carmen weeping beside Michael's grave revealed depths of connection and loss that Robert had never fully understood during their professional relationship. He had appreciated her competence and reliability, had trusted her completely with Michael's care, but had never recognized that her love for his son was as profound and authentic as his own. Now, watching her grief pour out in this sacred space, Robert began to understand that Michael's death had devastated not just his immediate family, but someone whose bond with the boy had been forged through daily intimacy, shared jokes, bedtime stories, and the countless small moments that create real relationship rather than mere caregiving obligation. Carmen's presence at the grave spoke of love that persisted beyond employment, of mourning that honored connection rather than duty. The child in Carmen's arms began to stir, his movement drawing Robert's attention in ways that made his heart stop completely. As the boy turned in Carmen's embrace, Robert saw features that seemed impossible yet undeniable. Michael's distinctive eye shape, his particular smile, the way he held his head when curious or uncertain. The resemblance was so striking that Robert felt reality shift around him, forcing recognition of possibilities he had never considered, yet which now seemed to explain so much about Carmen's devotion to Michael, her understanding of his needs, her intuitive ability to connect with him in ways that had impressed Robert even while puzzling him. The boy appeared to be perhaps 7 years old, close enough to Michael's age to suggest connections that challenged everything Robert thought he understood about Carmen's life and relationship to his family. Standing frozen behind a large monument, Robert processed implications that rewrote his understanding of the past 2 years while creating possibilities for the future he had thought was defined only by loss and isolation. If this child was somehow related to Michael, a brother he had never known existed, perhaps born from relationships that predated Robert's marriage to Michael's mother, then Carmen's exceptional care for Michael suddenly made sense as family connection rather than professional excellence. The possibility that Michael had not died alone in the world, that some part of him might continue through blood relationship Robert had never suspected, created hope and confusion in equal measure. Yet the moment felt too sacred for immediate confrontation, too loaded with grief and possibility for casual conversation or demand for explanations that might shatter whatever delicate truth was revealing itself in this space dedicated to honoring Michael's memory. After several minutes of observation that felt both necessary and intrusive, Robert gathered the courage to approach Carmen and the child whose presence had transformed his understanding of grief, family, and possibility. His footsteps on the gravel path announced his arrival, causing Carmen to look up with eyes red from crying and wide with surprise at seeing her former employer in this sacred space where she had never expected encounter with anyone from Michael's world. "Mr. Ashford," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion and uncertainty about how to explain her presence here with a child whose existence she had kept carefully separated from her professional life. I didn't expect to see you here today." Her words carried love for Michael alongside fear about consequences that might follow from this unexpected revelation of connections she had never been free to share. Robert approached slowly, his own eyes filling with tears as he processed the full impact of seeing Carmen's grief and the child whose resemblance to Michael created questions that transcended curiosity to touch the deepest needs of his broken heart. "Carmen," he said gently, understanding that this moment required delicacy rather than demand, compassion rather than interrogation. "I come here every week. Michael, he meant everything to me. I can see he meant something special to you too." His words were carefully chosen to create space for explanation without pressure, recognition without accusation, opening possibilities for conversation that might lead to understanding rather than defensive protection of secrets that had shaped Carmen's careful boundaries between professional and personal life. The child in Carmen's arms watched this exchange with intelligent eyes that seemed familiar yet strange. His attention focused on Robert with curiosity that lacked fear despite never having met this tall man whose grief seemed to mirror his mother's. "This is Diego," Carmen said quietly, her voice carrying weight of revelation that would change everything for all of them. He's Michael's half-brother. Same father, different mothers. I never told you because I didn't know how, because it felt too complicated, because I was afraid you wouldn't understand or would think I had ulterior motives for taking the position as Michael's nanny. Her explanation tumbled out with the relief of long-held secrets finally finding voice, yet also with terror about consequences that might follow from truth she had protected for years. Robert felt the world shift around him as Carmen's words created new understanding of the past, while opening possibilities for the future he had thought was defined only by loss and isolation. Diego was Michael's brother, not just in resemblance, but in blood, carrying forward genetic connection to the son whose death had seemed to end Robert's role as father forever. The recognition that Michael had not been alone in the world, that family connection existed in the form of this beautiful child who bore his features and perhaps his gifts, created hope that felt both miraculous and terrifying. "Why didn't you tell me?" Robert asked, his voice carrying hurt alongside wonder, processing the complexity of Carmen's situation while beginning to understand the impossible position she had occupied as caregiver to one brother while mother to another, managing professional boundaries that prevented her from revealing the truth about her son's connection to the family she served. Carmen's explanation unfolded slowly, each detail revealing the complexity of choices she had made to protect both her son and her employment while honoring the love she felt for both boys. Diego's father was the same man who had fathered Michael, a relationship that had ended before she knew about the pregnancy, leaving her to raise her son alone while watching Michael grow up in the luxury and privilege that Diego would never experience. "I took the position as Michael's nanny because I wanted Diego to know his brother, even if it had to be through my work rather than direct relationship," she explained, tears streaming down her face as she shared the pain of years spent managing impossible boundaries. "I would tell Diego stories about his brother, show him pictures when I could, help him understand that he had family even if that family couldn't acknowledge him directly." The revelation transformed Robert's understanding of Carmen's exceptional dedication to Michael, her intuitive understanding of his needs, her ability to anticipate his moods and respond to his unspoken concerns. Her love for Michael had been authentic but complicated by the knowledge that she was caring for her own son's brother while unable to provide the same advantages for Diego that Michael enjoyed by virtue of his mother's marriage to Robert. "Diego knows about Michael," Carmen continued, her voice breaking with the weight of tragedy shared between brothers who had never been allowed to meet despite living in parallel worlds. "He knows that his brother died, and he grieves for family he never got to know. That's why we come here, so Diego can feel connected to Michael, so he can honor the brother he loved from distance." Robert knelt to Diego's level, seeing Michael's features in this child who represented both loss and possibility, grief and hope intertwined in ways that challenged everything he thought he understood about family, connection, and the nature of love that transcends traditional boundaries. "Hello, Diego," he said softly, his voice carrying wonder and pain as he encountered the nephew he had never known existed. "I'm Robert. I was Michael's. I was your brother's father." The words felt inadequate to capture the complexity of relationships being revealed, yet they created bridge between two people whose lives had been shaped by the same boy they both loved and mourned. Diego studied Robert with intelligent eyes that seemed to recognize something familiar, his response carrying dignity beyond his years as he processed meeting the man who had raised his brother. The conversation that followed was gentle but profound, with Diego sharing memories of stories Carmen had told him about Michael, while Robert began to understand the depth of connection that had existed between the brothers despite their separation. Carmen had created careful ways for Diego to feel part of Michael's life, celebrating his birthday quietly, following his school achievements through her daily observations, sharing Michael's interests, and helping Diego develop similar hobbies that created invisible bonds between them. Robert realized that Michael's death had orphaned Diego in ways he had never considered, robbing him not just of present relationship, but of future possibilities for connection that Carmen had hoped might someday be possible when the boys were old enough to navigate the complexities of their shared parentage in different circumstances. Standing beside Michael's grave with Carmen and Diego, Robert felt something shift within him that transcended grief to embrace possibility he had never imagined. The child who bore his son's features represented not replacement, but continuation, not consolation for loss, but expansion of family in ways that honored Michael's memory while creating space for new love and connection. "Carmen," he said quietly, his voice carrying decision that would reshape all their lives. "I don't want Diego to lose another father figure. I don't want to lose the chance to know Michael's brother. Would you? Would you both consider coming home with me? Not as employee and employer, but as family." His proposal was tentative but heartfelt, recognizing that such dramatic change required careful consideration and genuine willingness from all parties rather than assumption that his resources could solve complex emotional and social dynamics. Carmen's response revealed the same careful consideration that had characterized all her major decisions, weighing Diego's needs against potential complications while processing the possibility that her son might finally receive recognition as part of the family she had served for years. "Diego deserves to know his heritage," she said slowly, her words carrying both hope and caution about changes that could transform their lives in ways both wonderful and challenging. "But I need to know that this comes from genuine care rather than grief, that you want us as family rather than as reminders of what you've lost." Her conditions were reasonable and necessary, ensuring that any new arrangement would honor everyone's dignity while serving Diego's best interests rather than simply addressing Robert's loneliness or sense of obligation. The weeks that followed were filled with careful conversations, family counseling sessions, and gradual integration that honored the complexity of their situation while building trust and authentic connection. Diego's transition into Robert's home was managed with sensitivity to his needs and Carmen's concerns, creating space for him to maintain his own identity while embracing new opportunities for education, enrichment, and family connection. Robert found that loving Diego didn't diminish his grief for Michael, but rather created new understanding of how love multiplies rather than divides, how family can expand beyond traditional boundaries when built on foundations of genuine care and mutual respect. Diego's presence brought life back into rooms that had been silent since Michael's death, his laughter and curiosity reminding Robert of the joy that children could bring when nurtured with patience and authentic attention. Carmen's role in their household transformed from professional caregiver to something approaching partnership in Diego's upbringing, her insights about his needs and personality helping Robert understand how to be an effective father figure while respecting the primary bond between mother and son. Their relationship evolved into mutual respect and shared commitment to Diego's welfare, built on recognition that successful co-parenting required collaboration rather than hierarchy, understanding rather than assumption, patience rather than immediate resolution of complex dynamics. The household that had been marked by silence and isolation gradually filled with the sounds of family life. Homework discussions, weekend activities, bedtime stories that honored both Michael's memory and Diego's present needs for security and belonging. 2 years later, Robert stood in the same cemetery where his understanding of family had been transformed, but now he was accompanied by Diego and Carmen as they visited Michael's grave together as a family unit that honored all their connections and losses. Diego had grown into a confident child whose resemblance to Michael remained striking, but whose personality was uniquely his own, shaped by Carmen's values and Robert's resources, while maintaining the distinctive character that made him beloved for his own qualities rather than merely as reminder of his deceased brother. The grave visits had become family tradition that honored Michael's memory while celebrating the life and potential that continued through Diego's growth and development. Diego's education had flourished in ways that honored both his natural abilities and his family's commitment to ensuring he had every opportunity to develop his potential. Robert's wealth had provided access to excellent schools and enrichment programs, while Carmen's wisdom had ensured that privilege didn't corrupt Diego's character or connection to his community and heritage. The boy excelled academically, while maintaining humility and kindness that reflected the values both his parents had worked to instill. His success honored Michael's memory while creating his own legacy of achievement and character that made Robert proud in ways that transcended their complicated beginning as family. Carmen and Robert's relationship had evolved into genuine partnership built on shared love for Diego and mutual respect for each other's contributions to his upbringing. While romantic involvement had never developed between them, their collaboration demonstrated that successful families could take many forms when built on foundations of authentic care and commitment to children's welfare. Carmen had pursued educational opportunities that enhanced her ability to advocate for Diego, while also preparing for career advancement that honored her own aspirations alongside her maternal responsibilities. Robert had learned to balance business obligations with family time, understanding that true success required presence and attention rather than merely financial provision. Most significantly, their family story had become testament to the possibility that loss could create space for new love, that grief could coexist with joy, that families could be built through choice and commitment rather than only blood and convention. Diego carried forward the best of Michael's legacy while creating his own path through life, his success honoring both the brother he had never met and the parents who had chosen to build family from circumstances that began in separation and sorrow. The cemetery visits continued as celebration of life rather than merely mourning of death, recognition that love persists beyond loss, and that family connections can transcend every boundary when nurtured with patience, wisdom, and the courage to embrace possibility even in the aftermath of devastating grief. This incredible journey from grief to hope shows us that family is built through love, not just blood. If you believe in the power of second chances and unexpected blessings, hit that subscribe button and share this story with someone who needs to remember that even our deepest losses can become foundations for beautiful new beginnings. Robert and Diego's family journey became proof that healing emerges not from forgetting loss, but from allowing grief to create space for new love that honors what was lost while embracing what remains possible. Their story reminds us that family boundaries are more expansive than traditional definitions suggest, that children carry forward the best of those who came before while creating their own unique legacies. In a world where loss often feels final, their connection demonstrates that love multiplies rather than divides, that the courage to expand our definitions of family can transform even the deepest sorrow into foundation for joy that honors both memory and hope.